Good morning, everyone. We are so honored to have Daniel to be our speaker today. And he is the expert in 成为时论. I'm sure that we will learn a lot from him today. So pay close attention because, you know, there will be questions asked. So here is Daniel. Thank you very much, Don.
Good morning, everyone. I'm curious first, very quickly, if I could meet all of you. So because this is my first time in the class, if you would just kind of go around the room quickly and say your name and where you're coming from.
This is Lisa Wang. I'm coming from Chicago.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Francesca from the east side, St. Louis.
Very good.
So Corey Russell coming from my basement in St. Charles.
All right.
Josh Dibbold, St. Louis Hills. Good morning.
Morning.
Sherry from U City.
Oh, very good. I'm glad you're here, Sherry. You're going to help teach this class. Okay. All right.
And David, also from U City.
Lee Patton coming from Corey's basement. Coming from my house in De Pere.
All right.
Dennis from Everett.
Kansas City. Coming from Union, Missouri.
Carolyn from Kansas City. I see her.
Jeff and Dennis, you need to go again because you stepped on each other.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Dennis from
Dennis, go ahead.
Everettsville. Dennis.
Okay.
And this is Jeff Matthews from Union, Missouri.
Oh, Union. Okay.
Hi, it's Florence from San Francisco.
Oh, so far you have the prize, the longest commute.
Kyle Shive, Edwardsville, quarantining with Dennis.
Right. Yeah.
And Rick from St. Charles.
Hello, Rick. Anyone else? Okay. So I'm going to I'm going to ask. Somebody else is here. You have to turn on your microphones if you're going to say something, Christine.
Oh, good morning. Thank you for letting me in. Thank you.
Oh, very good. Okay. All right, Christina's here. All right. So I would like to just begin by saying that I'm going to ask Francesca if she would start doing the screen share in a few minutes. But for right now, I want to make a few introductory remarks. So if she would put my picture up there, I'm going to make a few introductory remarks. First, I want to say that this is a topic that required Xuanzang to study for many years before he actually put together the Zhengwei Shalun. So if it took the great monk many, many years to study this and understand this, Francesca, can you put my face up there? I got my slides. I'm looking for my face. Maybe harder. My face is here. Anyway.
Your face is in the main window.
Oh, it is now? Okay.
Yes.
I just can't. So, this book here is the Zhengwei Shalun. And as you can see, it's 817 pages long. But that's not a big deal because half of it's in Chinese. So every page is English on one side, Chinese on the other. This is just one of the translations, but it's really the best translation that we have. I took the book cover off so that the book cover would not get spoiled. This is a scientific study of the psychology of the mind. We should not confuse this and make this into something else other than it is. Remember that the Buddha, when he was asked religious questions, he answered every one of the 14 religious questions the same way. He said, does not apply, avyakata. So if the Buddha said, does not apply, we should listen and not try to make Buddhism something that the Buddha himself did not want to do. In addition to that, when he was asked why it was that it did not apply, he answered the monk Malunkayaputa by saying that it would not end distress. In fact, it might even cause more distress. It would not end the suffering, it might cause more. So it would not be beneficial. So when it comes to topics other than the psychological study, we need to be a little bit careful, because the Buddha was interested in one thing. He was interested to help people end suffering. Ending suffering, he didn't say that we didn't have aging, or that we didn't fall down and break our foot. We can do that. Or that the body would eventually decay. He was very clear about that. The suffering that he was able to help us to end is the suffering in the mind. So this is a psychological study called mind only, or mere consciousness, not the study of anything else. So when we limit ourselves to that, that will be helpful. Also, this topic is so deep, so profound, so difficult that it's not going to be something that we're going to be able to swallow whole any more than we could swallow an elephant whole in one meal. This is what we're vegetarians anyway. I'll say a vegetarian elephant. We're not going to be able to swallow that in one meal. So it's going to be more of an introduction of some of the main points related to this. And to start off with, I will need to give you the historical context. So this morning, I'm going to talk about it. The first slide is, I'm going to be sharing with you the story of Xuanzang this morning, and the history of how this came about, that the Chengwei Shulan was written, and also talk about the foundation of the Chengwei Shulan, which is really a commentary on the commentaries related to Vasubandhu's 30 verses. So we need to know about some of the things related to the 30 verses. Now, obviously, if we were going to study the 30 verses in themselves, it would be a whole course. So again, I'm going to just need to give you a little sample, some tastes, some understanding of what's going on. There will be some time where I will be able to listen to your questions and your comments, and there'll be some times for us to have a break this morning. So our goal this morning is to learn about Xuanzang, the history around this whole period, and also to delve into, in more detail, the 30 verses. So without too much further ado, I'm going to start with Xuanzang, and please understand a couple of things. Number one, it was a lot of work to put together the slides. You have most of the slides. I've added a few things and changed a few things around, but basically you have the slides that are pertinent. If there's something that I have here that you don't have, please let me know and I'll make it available. The other thing, my slides have a little bit more color and design to them than I just sent you the bare bones ones, easier to print. Also, I wouldn't say that my diacriticals are consistent. So please be forgiving of me not to get the diacriticals and all of the words, because I just didn't have time to do all of that. In Word, you can just press a button and do it, but I don't know how to do that in PowerPoint. I think you have to just go through it one by one. The other thing is that I have put a bunch of Chinese in wherever I could for those people who are Chinese speakers or those people who would like to know more about the Chinese. Also understand that my pronunciation, particularly when it comes to tones, is at a pre-first grade level. So, so I need still a lot of work. I'll do my very best. Okay, so with those few caveats, also, even though I'm an old professor, having taught at Washington University for so many years, I'm used to teaching in obviously an academic style. So that has its pluses and minuses, but I've never taught an entire class over Zoom. So I'll try to make it more fun. We'll see what we can do. All right, let's begin now with Xuanzang and Cheng Wei Shalan. That's where our story begins, with this wonderful monk. As you see him walking along with his backpack and a hat, protecting his head, and this little tassel dangling. And the reason that he had this little tassel dangling is because he wanted to remain focused on his goal. He didn't want to be distracted by the senses, the sense-based contact. So he kept this as his focal point on his journey. So Xuanzang, born in 602, passing away at 664. So he was around 63 years old when he passed away, almost 64. Never quite made it to Medicare, unfortunately. So he is a very famous person, known as a pilgrim who went to India, who he lived in a small village, and as we'll find out that during this period of time, there was a lot of upheaval at the end of the Shui dynasty, and then when the Tang dynasty began, his family moved to Chang'an, which was to be the capital of Western China, and this area was safer. So now in modern day, Chang'an is called Xi'an. That's where the terracotta soldiers were discovered. That's a story for another time. So he entered a monastery when he was 13, and he had an older brother. Xuanzang was so famous that they're still having international conferences on him using this picture. When he lived in Chang'an in this first part of the Tang dynasty, then he became questioning of what his teachers were telling him about the sutras and the suttas and the shastras, the commentaries, and he thought that they were incomplete, or that there were things that were mistaken in there, and the translation was not good. So he wanted to go to the source to find out what was really going on. And he was told by his teachers that he should go to Nalanda, which was the main monastery in northern India. But of course, at that time, not so easy to travel. You just can't get on a plane or, get in your minivan and go where you want to go. This is a serious problem. So we're in the very early part of the 7th century, and this is not easy to get from one place to the other. Plus, there are geographical obstacles like deserts and mountains and rivers to cross. But Xuanzang, he had strong motivation. He really wanted to go and find out what was really going on, what was missing in the teachings that had been received. And so he If we go to the next slide, we're moving along here, yes. So we see that he wants to go and learn about the original writings of Asanga and Vasubandhu, these two brothers who are responsible, and we know now, for Yogacara Buddhism. So we go to the next slide, and we can see that the conditions in China at the time, when Xuanzang was very young, there was a lot of struggle in China, and but when he, even by the age of 13, he was so brilliant that he was giving lectures to the assemblies. And the Shui dynasty was in upheaval and collapsing, and certain parts of China were very dangerous. So this is why his family moved. The Tang dynasty in 1618 was established. And so this is, if we go to the slide with the map, we can see what China looked like at the time. And you can see in the center on the brown part, you see the city of Chang'an, which is important, and also at this time, and also seeing the city of Chengdu, because that's where a very important starting point will be for Xuanzang's journey. As you can see, it leads him into what we now know as Tibet. And at that time, Tibet was really very much of a desert, and then he was going to have to go through was now Afghanistan, and then down through what is now known as Pakistan into India. So this is, if we go to the next slide, we can see that he wanted to find a complete copy of the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra. Now, this is a very extensive text on the ground of Yogacara, a very important commentary that was written by Asanga, and he believed that if he found the original copy of this, that this would be helpful to him in his study and to be able to answer certain questions that were very difficult for him to understand. So now we go to the next slide, which is the important slide. This is Xuanzang's overriding question. If there is no such thing as an inherently existing permanent self, then what goes from life to life until enlightenment is reached? So this is the big question. It didn't make sense to him, and he asked this question of many of his teachers. He asked this question to his brother. No one could give him a satisfactory answer. So this became a serious problem in his mind. And so in the next slide, we see that he begins the 16-year journey. It begins in 627. He must have been 25 years old at the time, to Nalanda, and he didn't return for 16 years. So I'm going to tell you a few of the stories related to this, so that you have an understanding of the context of how difficult this was. So at first, Xuanzang wrote a letter to the Tang Emperor Taizong, and he asked him very respectfully that he wanted to go to India to be able to study at Nalanda. And the Tang Emperor, he sent back a message to the monastery saying, this monk cannot go because it's too dangerous, and we're having these disputes with the people to the west, and there are marauding tribes there, and very dangerous, too dangerous, and so you are not allowed to go. So the next year, Xuanzang wrote another letter to the Tang Emperor asking again if he could go. Now you have to remember, in the Buddhist tradition, you just don't ask once. You ask maybe 3 times before you get the answer. So for him, he was just thinking probably, oh, I'm just going to ask another time and another time. Eventually he will say yes. This time, no answer at all. And Xuanzang said, oh, this is even better than I thought. I'm just going to go. So he just takes off and he makes an arrangement to get a horse and from some people that were dealing in horses, and they said, oh, this monk, he doesn't know very much. So they give him the very worst horse. So Xuanzang gets on this horse and he starts traveling across to Chengdu. And before even he gets there, oh, the poor horse can't go on. So Xuanzang has to leave the horse behind. Then he goes into the desert, and several times he nearly dies of thirst. But usually something happens, he runs into someone, or some miracle, sort of in our own way of looking at things, miraculously he would find water and he'd be able to continue. There were occasions where he was captured by bandits and they wanted to kill him, and he started chanting the sutra related to Guan Yin, and the bandits became frightened hearing this monk chant the sutras related to Guan Yin. Even at that time, the bandits knew about Guan Yin, so they left him alone. Also on the way, he met a man who had been sitting in the lotus posture for many, many years, so much so that his legs had been almost calcified. He couldn't move his legs. So Xuanzang asked him, he said, what have you experienced? What knowledge have you gained sitting here? And the man said, he says, I'm just waiting for somebody to come here and enlighten me. So Xuanzang says, oh, okay, well, I'm going to continue on my journey because I'm not just going to sit here and wait for someone to enlighten me. I have to do it myself. So he travels throughout this area until he gets to India, and he travels, so he doesn't go to Nalanda right away. He travels all around. One of the places that he stops is in Taxila. Taxila is once a great city, but now laid to ruin. This was the city that Alexander the Great, this is how far Alexander the Great got on his journey to conquer the world. And so shortly after coming to Taxila, he passed away. But in the process of going to Taxila, he realized what an important center Taxila was, so much so that he was fortunate that he didn't get into a big battle there, and Taxila was not destroyed by Alexander the Great. And he also traveled to Bodh Gaya. Of course, that's where the Buddha had his enlightenment. So he traveled all around to many important places. He eventually arrived at Nalanda, and he then traveled around northern India and then went back to Nalanda to study further. And at the end of his studies that we're going to talk about, the Silabhadra, the monk that he had been studying with, provided him with 600 text scrolls and an elephant to carry them back. But on his first attempt to go back to India, the elephant was lost in a big flood in the Indus River, and so he had to travel back and again and say, oh, all of my scrolls were lost. So they gave him yet another set of scrolls, and this time he was able to return to India, to China. So you can see on here where he started in Chengdu and went through the area of what we now know as Afghanistan, and down through what is now Pakistan, and then through to almost near to southern India and came all the way around eastern India, and then eventually to Nalanda, which is very close to the border with Nepal. And then he traveled around and then eventually returned. So one of the monks that he studied with, very important monk, was named Silabhadra, who was the abbot of Nalanda at the time. Silabhadra was said to be 106 years old, although in my research, he was probably closer to only, this is exaggeration, he was probably only 103 or 104. So probably not as old as they made him out to be. Silabhadra actually at this age had made a determination that he was ready to pass on. So as is the custom, he gathered his monks around him, at this time hundreds of monks, and he said, in the morning I will be gone. I will leave you a poem, and this is the end, and my disciples will continue. So they all bowed. They knew that it was his time. And then Silabhadra went to his room, his chambers, and prepared to pass away. So while he was sleeping, he had a dream. And in the dream, he saw a monk, a Chinese monk, coming to visit Nalanda, and that this monk was very serious, very involved in the practice, and wanted very much to learn the teachings. And he wanted Xuanzang to teach him. He wanted to be taught by Silabhadra. So in that dream, he realized that he was not ready to pass away. So in the morning, all of the monks came, all ready to have the funeral. And Silabhadra sat up in his bed, and he told them the story, and they were all very surprised. So yes. So Silabhadra was particularly well known for his ability to understand the deeper sutras, the deeper shastras. And so he was able to teach Xuanzang, along with several others, the greater meaning of this. So this is a picture here of Nalanda as it is today. As you can see, it's kind of fallen into disrepair, although my understanding is that they have done some renovation of this area and now have started up a new Nalanda University, which would be really good. We could go there once COVID is over. So while he was there, Xuanzang was tutored in Yogacara teachings directly from Silabhadra. And several years he was there. And when he returned back and forth from his travels, he would always study again with Silabhadra. He brought a wagon load, actually an elephant load of Buddhist text and important works, including the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra, and had, they said, 657 texts when he came back. We should note that the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra has not yet been translated into English because of how extensive it is and difficult it is. There are some groups that have embarked on this. I only have it by word of mouth that the City of 10,000 Buddhas has a translation group that's been involved with this. Several years ago, Caddy helped in the translation of one section of the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra that has to do with the pre-Bhumi states, the grounds. So we have studied this in our Bodhisattva group. So when he returned, he came back and he expected that actually that he would be put in jail for having defied the emperor. However, there was a new emperor, so that was his benefit. So he was given, instead of a jail sentence, he was given a center where he could do translations. And there were other monks there that had been preparing, learning. So actually, not the Emperor Taizong, that's a mistake, did not give him this monastery. This was given by a different monastery, a different emperor, interim emperor. And then this was one of the monks that had practiced well and was ready to help him. His name was Kuei-ji. He'll become an important part of the story as we continue along. So with the emperor's support, he set up this large translation center in near Chang'an, drawing students and collaborators from all over. And the emperor, this is the correct emperor here, Guozhong, he was between Taizong and then Xuanzong, called him to court and gave him this monastery and to work and to study and to do the translations. And eventually he moved to Hua Palace later in his life. During this period of translation, really intensive, 75 works and 1,335 fascicles, chapters, where he put them into Chinese. And of course, the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra was part of this. Xuanzang only wrote one of his own commentaries. The one commentary that he wrote was the Changlei Shulan. Everything else was translations. So his school was called the Faxiang School, the Dharma Characteristic School. This name was eventually used as kind of a critical name by the people who wanted to debate the value of Yogacara. So they use this kind of as an insulting name. So now we don't use the name Faxiang so much, we use more the name Yogacara. So that hopefully will clear that up. Maybe Caddy, of course, later may say more about how that came to be. So in India, he received many titles, Tripitaka Master, and he died in 64, and actually he was 3 years old. Yes. All right. So this is his one text. If we go to the next slide, the Changlei Shulan, this is Xuanzang's only commentary that he himself wrote. Now, this is a mammoth work, as I've shown you, and it was completed in 659. The problem is that when Xuanzang studied this, he came to realize that there were 10 major commentaries by different masters on the 30 verses of Vasubandhu. So if we go to the next slide, we can see that the aim of this work is to give the complete system of Yogacara in an organized way. This work, however, required a lot of help, and one of his main helpers, Kuei-ji, was very interested that the entire set of 10 commentaries would be included in this work. Whereas Xuanzang said, really, just 2 commentaries, Dharmapala and Silabhadra. The other commentaries are not so important. We can just work from these 2 and make the book much simpler and easier for people to understand. And Kuei-ji said, no, we need all of the 10 commentaries, otherwise the meaning will be lost. So to avoid an argument, and apparently Kuei-ji got quite heated about this and even said that he would resign and not be involved, Xuanzang said, okay, we'll do all 10 commentaries. So difficult this will be. So, so since Kuei-ji was so aligned with this, later after Xuanzang's passing, Kuei-ji really became like the head of this Faxiang school. Didn't last so long, but he used as the main text the Changwei Shalan. So there are many translations of this, not so many translations, just a few. So we'll be looking at a couple of these translations in English. These are the 10 masters from the Changwei Shalan. And I highlighted Dharmapala, who's the most profound, even Citramati, who is also very, very profound. These are the ones that Silabhadra really emphasized in his teaching. So the rest of them had things to say and gave context, but it made it very, very difficult when you read the Changwei Shalan. Sometimes he just says, this is the commentary of the first one, the second one, the third one, all the way up. And not until you get to the last two do you really know who is who sometimes. So it's difficult. So the translations into English, as we'll see on the next slide. This Valet Poussin, who did the first translation and also gave extensive notes from Kuei-ji, translated this into French. And then this was translated into English. I do not have the English translation. I think on the internet, it's maybe $600 or something like that. So Wei Tat, as you see at the very bottom, he did his own translation in 1973, and that's the one that I have on my desk. There's also translation by Cook that I don't have here in front of me, who did a translation from for the Numata Association in Berkeley, California. But another very important resource is Dan Lusthouse's book called Buddhist Phenomenology. Probably in the West, Dan Lusthouse at Harvard is considered to be the most prominent Western scholar and teacher on Yogacara Buddhism. So his book is not so easy to read either. He goes into a lot of detail investigating Yogacara and explaining much of what was going on. Even when I attempted to read it at first, it was rather difficult. So going back to Silabhadra, he wanted to help Xuanzang understand the difference between Madhyamaka, Yogacara, and Tathagatagarbha, and to understand all of these strains of thought took Xuanzang quite a few years to understand. So he was very grateful to Silabhadra for helping him. So in the next slide, we can see a little bit about his travel log that he put together. He kept a journal with him, and this journal was not really a commentary at all about Buddhism, but really just about his journey, so that we know the hardships and the difficulties. And he also wrote about what he observed, what kind of shape Buddhism was in the 7th century around this area. So we have lots of details and understanding of where there were monks and where there used to be monks, where there were monasteries and where there used to be monasteries. So his nickname became Tang Xuanzang, the Xuanzang of the Tang Dynasty. So if we go to the next slide, we can see that this actually became a story that was written as a kind of a novel. His Journey to the West travelogue became a children's book that's very well known. I don't know if Jade is here with us today, but she probably, or other people could say later, be interested to know if all children in China read this book or are just familiar with it. And it's called Journey to the West, and the main character is this Monkey King. And the Monkey King goes on all of these adventures. I'm not going to go into the story, but basically the interesting thing about this is the Monkey King, and the story, in a sense, is kind of a rough parallel to Xuanzang. Here, the name of the main character, there is a monk, his name is Tang Xuanzang. Not so well disguised. So as we can see, he's the monk who's helping the Monkey King, who has many superpowers. So during his trip to India, he discovered many things. We can skip this slide and go to the next one. He had several debates while he was in India with Majjhima, let me get this right, Madhyamaka followers. These are the followers of Nagarjuna, and there were, and Xuanzang acquitted himself quite well. People were quite happy that he was able to take his knowledge and use that as in debate. Okay, so again, his return to China, I think I've talked about this already, so we don't have to go through this. This is a temple that was in Xuanzang's honor, and then he has quite a long legacy as one of the greatest, most prolific, and accurate Chinese translators of Indian Buddhist texts. When we recite the Heart Sutra we're in Chinese, we're using Xuanzang's version. His translations of the Heart Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, and many of the other major sutras are really the best that we have been able to find. So we're very fortunate that he did such a good job in his work. So, and actually he did some amending of the translations in the Agama as well. So this is very important stuff. During Xuanzang's lifetime, Buddhism was experienced a great period of growth. And during the Tang Dynasty, Buddhism was most of the time was supported by the emperor and the locals. Many schools had been using different texts that were not particularly clear and authentic, but after Xuanzang, he was able to bring clarity and some unity, and people had a better understanding of what to practice. And the students, even looking at the work of the Mahaprajnaparamita Sutras as well, were part of his translation projects. So this is a very large statue that's now, I believe, in Xi'an. So Dan Lusthouse says that one of the great monks of all time, renowned and influential in Asia. Okay. So what we're going to come back to Xuanzang's overriding question, because since I stated this question to you, I know that your mind has been overwhelmed as well. If there's no such thing as an inherently existing permanent self, then what goes from life to life until enlightenment is reached? And what Xuanzang's discovery is going to be, I'm going to give you the answer to the question right here. So in case you fall asleep during this Zoom, you'll say, oh, now I know the answer. Here it is. Everything, including what we think of as self, is mere consciousness. And all mere consciousness is empty of inherent reality. So if you understand that, then you can sign off and you can enjoy the rest of your day. In the meantime, for those of us who don't get this, we're going to continue on into the next set of slides. All right. So let me just pause here for a moment, and if anyone has any particular questions, I will do my best along with Sherry and Caddy. We have other people here who are very familiar. I don't know if the master is here or the venerables are here as well, but those people who are familiar with this, I'm happy to answer any questions at this time. And if I get no questions, that means that you all know the answer to the puzzle.
Hey, Don, do we know if the original Sanskrit texts are still existent, the ones that have been translated into Chinese, the actual ones that were brought over from India are actual verbatim reproductions of those?
So maybe Caddy knows the answer to that question because she's been to Xi'an. Do you know, Caddy, if we have any of the original text still in Sanskrit?
Well, the Sanskrit copy is still, I think, still available. I'm not quite sure about if it's the original or not, because the sutras that he brought back has go under, the pagoda. It's putting the, store the sutras has been, going through a lot of incident of fire and all those. So we're not sure. But the Chinese translation, it's a collection of the Chinese canon in the, Chinese canon Tipitaka. So that is a Xuanzang's Chinese translation. The version is still there.
Thank you.
So we do have the Sanskrit version of Vasubandhu's 30 verses. That we do have an accurate reproduction of that, if not the original. So we can see what Xuanzang used as his source, and actually in Wei Tat's translation, I can show you the printed version that at some point, maybe I'll, let's look forward to the time when we can go back to Maba and I can show you the text, and you can see that there is actually the Sanskrit is actually in here in both versions, both in the original Sanskrit text and in the Romanized text. So I have, so we can look at that and compare that with the Chinese. So we have that as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm fascinated in the authenticity of the actual, the paper or whatever it was written down on, and each time it was reproduced and verifying, because it's like a game of telephone sometimes, right? Even if you're verbatim copying it just on text, sometimes there's even things that factor into that too. So,
yeah.
Don?
Yes.
I found a copy of Wei Tat's translation online. It is published by the 法相学会. It's the Association of the 法相. Yeah, but it's not complete. So I think they publish it like a monthly or yearly publication. So I did find a copy of that. So you don't have to pay $600 for that.
Oh, very good. And it's in English, right?
It's exactly the same as you're holding the book.
Oh, very good. All right. Excellent. Okay. That's good to know. Excellent. Thank you. Yes, the book that I have, the Waitat version, has not been published again. There are not very many copies of this book, and when we tried to get copies of it, they were out of print. So it's good to hear that it's being published again, because the family, Waitat's family, apparently wanted to keep this book from being published. I don't understand why, but so you're saying, Caddy, that it's now being published online?
It's for the members only with the Fashang Association. I just happened to browse, and then for some reason I got into it.
Oh,
Yeah.
You must have good karma. There you go. Very good. So any other questions or comments here on Xuanzang? Maybe for some of you, this is your first time encountering the great monk. Yes. Yeah. Anyone else with comments or things that you want to add, please.
I just wanted to point out that I posted the Numata translation of the Wei Shilun on Slack.
Oh.
And, yeah, it's available for free in a PDF. So we can read that if we want to. But it does not have the footnotes of commentary that are in the Waitat. So it's not quite as complete.
Well, thank you, Sherry.
So there's also a movie on YouTube. I'll post it in Slack, but it's in Chinese, but the subtitles are in English. So if anybody's interested, it's on.
This is on Xuanzang, yes. So maybe this is the most recent movie that was made. It was kind of a major production. The company that did this in China. There have been a number of movies about Xuanzang, and I'm glad that you brought that up. Because
Yeah, this one's the newest one. It was, I think, last year, or I haven't watched it. It's in my to be watched queue, but
very good.
I haven't got there yet.
We have CDs of that at MABA.
Oh, yes.
Venerable Kang Yang gave me one of those.
Oh, wonderful. Does it have the subtitles in it?
No.
Oh, yes. So I think the one that Corey was talking about has the subtitles, which I think
that would be much better.
Yeah, it's in Slack. So.
Yeah, and if you would send that over to me as well, I would appreciate it, because I'm not in the Slack group. So that would be great. Is Brad Pitt in that movie?
No, I think he was on another assignment.
Oh, he was. Oh, okay. So they didn't have him. Okay. All right.
No, but I did watch portions of it, and it was very well made.
Yes.
There was a 6-part miniseries that you can find on YouTube that Elaine recommended. This was a few years ago, and it was good. It was in English. It was mostly storytelling.
Yes, I've seen that one.
It went well.
So in the West, we don't know so much about some of these important folks. So as a good Buddhist studying Chinese versions of these things, knowing about Xuanzang is like knowing about George Washington. He's like the source, the main source in Western China. In the same way that Bodhidharma was the source for the Chan school in China in 527, so almost 100 years earlier. But we'll talk a little bit about that later. Any other comments before we go forward?
Before this class, my impression about Xuanzang was coming from that movie, the Monkey King, the West Journey with the Monkey King. That's all I knew about until 2019. I went to a pilgrimage with the Vipassana center. That we went to Nananda. We went to a lot of places. But now, because this class, the slides that you provided really brought back all my memories in pilgrimage, which was great. And
so have they rebuilt any of Nalanda, or is it still?
it's still about the same. Not that much that I could see a difference. We went to a place where they only show, say, this is where the monasteries will be. This is the place where the monks will be studying for their sutras and all that. So it's just like ruins in my impression.
Yeah.
So it was great that I have a chance to study in this class, that I get to know the value of Xuanzang to my Buddhist learning.
Oh, very good. And then you can take us on a trip.
If I could still remember that, I collected all the information. I kept it in a very good place, and I hope if there's a chance I can go back, so I will know it at a different level.
Oh, very good. Yes. So maybe we can start it. Caddy likes to lead pilgrimages, so maybe we can get a bunch of horses in Chang'an and we can ride across the desert together.
I'd prefer an elephant.
I want an elephant too.
No, you only get the elephant on the way back. Yes. Very good.
Shall we take a break or shall we continue?
It's how long do you take a break? Usually once an hour, or do you take a break halfway through? How do you usually
roughly about every hour?
Yeah,
Every
it depends
okay.
on when Corey wants to give us a break. He's in charge.
Okay.
So let's do a 10-minute break, if that's okay with everybody, and then we will come back at 9:40, and we will continue with now going a little bit more into some serious stuff. All right. I'm glad. I hope we're having. Are we ready to go to part 2? Second set of slides.
Sure.
So everybody back pretty much is good, or whoever's going to come back is back. So hopefully we haven't lost too many people. All right. Okay. So we're going to go now to Chung Wei Shalan part 2, which is I want to talk about the history and the introduction of this so that we have a better understanding. I think it's better to go through it a little bit in depth at the beginning so that when we get to the more difficult sections, we have some background and understanding. So I first want to now talk about Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu, and so and some of the characters that are related to the development. So the next slide, we go to next, and the next slide, and the next slide. All right. Now I'm talking about Nagarjuna's middle way school, Madhyamaka. So around 150 CE, we have the great monk Nagarjuna, who is number 14 in the series of ancestors. I don't like the word patriarch, particularly during this period of time where we are kind of enlightening ourselves as to how it is that females have not been so respected. And there are also, as you'll see, some possibility that one of the ancestors was female. So we definitely should be careful of the word patriarch. But in any event, whatever term we use, Nagarjuna sometimes called the second Buddha. because of his important contribution. At the time of Nagarjuna, Buddhism had fallen into some disrepair. There were two main difficulties or extremes that were happening in Buddhism. One extreme were people who were returning more to an ascetic type of life and just being involved in their own enlightenment, going off and just sitting and not being involved at all with the rest of society, not just for short periods of time, but for their entire lifetime. On the other side, there were scholar monks who were not practicing so much, but they were just writing more and more commentaries and debating with each other and arguing with each other. And Nagarjuna saw this difficulty and said, this is because they do not have the higher level teaching. Now, the question that we have historically is whether or not the Nagarjuna actually and his disciples, close disciples, wrote these Mahayana texts from scratch, or whether they were inspired, or whether these texts actually existed and were only in the hands of the ancestors, the people that were leading the Sangha. So we don't have that information. All we know is that great Bodhisattva, the Arahats, they made a commitment to use good speech, not lying. This would be a very serious infraction, is to lie about the source of the teachings. So we can say Nagarjuna, being a very important great monk, and those who came after him all knew that these were authentic teachings. So the Lotus Sutra, the Flower Ornament Sutra, the Surangama Sutra, Lankavatara Sutra, all of the Prajnaparamita Sutras that were not discussed in the earlier times, these were then available. Now you have to understand also that the Buddhist teachings themselves were passed along for 400 years before they were written down in Pali. So there may have been other teachings that were also written down that were, again, just given to the main teachers that were not made public, saying it was not the right time to make those public. So whether, so there are many stories. It's hard to go back 100 to 150 CE to know, interview, CNN can't come along, or even Fox News, to authenticate these things. So we're kind of stuck with the different interpretations that we have. So in any event, Nagarjuna made available these teachings and also did his own commentaries on the middle way school, Madhyamaka. And of course, these things were then passed along to Aryadeva, Chandrakirti, also very important teacher, and Dharmakirti. And then eventually this ends up in Tibet with Tsongkhapa and the Dalai Lamas and Shantideva. So there are many people who follow in this Madhyamaka. The name of the school in Tibet that the Dalai Lama follows is a Madhyamaka Prasangika. And the main text of this school from Nagarjuna, the commentary, is called The Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way. So this is translated, just a beautiful translation, just so poetic and so well done by J. Garfield. So the only question that I have, he has commentary also. He does a very, very good job. The only area that I debate with him about is his discussion of the four conditions. So his translation of the four conditions, I have a few debates about, but that's something that we can discuss as we go through this. But other than that, just a beautiful translation. Next. So we have the Nagarjuna, who we're not exactly sure. Nagarjuna is his name, Longshu. So his standing dragon. So this, I'm curious what we can talk during the break about whether or not this is an okay tree dragon. Probably also would be, or a dragon tree. I decided I like the term standing dragon, so we can discuss this later. So how he's translated. In any event, he founded this Madhyamaka school, mispronounced often as Madhyamika, but it's not Madhyamaka. So important to Madhyamaka, if you say Nagarjuna instead of Nagarjuna, and you say Madhyamaka, then people will say, oh, you're very intelligent, you know a lot. So his writings, very, very important, became the foundation of many of the schools. So we can't really say that Nagarjuna's Madhyamaka is really a school. It's bigger than a school. It's an entire branch, and it influences all of the schools. So I've given you some additional information next about Aryadeva. I'm not going to go into this here next. Chandra Kirti, I'll say just a few words that if you read some of the Tibetan commentaries and you read some of the texts, you'll note that Chandra Kirti is mentioned quite a bit. He's a very foundational link between Nagarjuna and the Tibetan schools. Again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. Next, Dharma Kirti, also very important commentator and in the Buddhist schools. And again, I'm not going to go, I'm just going to give you a little bit of information that you can read about on your own. And next, Tsongkhapa. So Tsongkhapa in the Tibetan school is really very, very important. His teachings, he goes into a great commentary on the 5 paths. His was inspired by Atisha, who taught a lot about the what's called mind training, Long Lojong, and he's very important in the founding of the Gelugpa tradition that is followed by the Dalai Lamas. So you'll when you see his name Tsongkhapa, you'll say, "Oh, I know, I understand how important he is." Next, we can look at the evolution. This is now we're going to get into some weeds here. I apologize because this is some confusing stuff. So you know that right after the Buddha passed away, there was a first council. And those of you who have studied, you know that at the first council, initially, a Sangha was not able to go because he had not yet reached the stage of being an Arahat. However, Ananda had all of the suttas memorized in his mind, and he needed to pass those on to all of the other monks so that they could memorize, each group could memorize a different part, and they could maintain the authenticity and practice together. But if he's not allowed to come in, now we're in deep trouble. So the monks all encouraged him. They said, Asanga, you must now go into retreat, and you can't come out until you reach the level of Arhat. So he stayed up many nights. They said perspiring, sweating, really working hard. Eventually, he attained the state of Arhat so that he could go to the first council. And at the first council, at the end, he recited all of the Buddhist teachings, and the monks that were there all, they were amazed that he had memorized all of these things, just in the same way that Upali had memorized the Vinaya. So all of these things were recited, and then he taught these to the different groups of monks who were then responsible for passing it on and on and on for 400 years. But during only 100 years later, they had a second council. Around 386 is the term, but there are different dates for the second council, and there's some question as to whether the second council was divided into two parts. We don't have exact information, but the key element of what happened in the second council, where the Mahasangika group was being criticized by the Stavira Nikaya group, because the Vasali monks of the Mahasangika were being lax in their practice of the Vinaya rules. And in addition to that, the Stavira Nikaya group said, maybe we should also make some modifications in the Vinaya. The Buddha said that the minor rules could be modified because we have to know that there are different conditions. And so we need to be able to recognize that Buddhism is going to be spread far and wide, and not everyone is going to be able to practice the Vinaya identically. There needs to be some flexibility. So the Vasali monks, who were not even following the Vinaya very well, but they were very conservative. They were the people who said, no, we must maintain the original rules, even though they weren't following them. So this became a big controversy, and there was a problem with this. And so there were 10 points that were being debated. You can find them on the internet, not too difficult. I didn't make slides about these 10 points. But the main point, of course, always comes down to, what is it that really people argue about? They argue about money. So this was the big problem, that the Vasali monks would go out and they would collect alms in the early part of the day, and then they would go back later in the day and they would ask for money. And the Savara monks, oh no, this is a violation. But there were other things that we need to be a little bit more flexible on. Like, for example, when you can stop eating. This is not so critical that if you stop eating at 11:45 or 12 o'clock or 12:30, you shouldn't become so rigid in these things. But these other points are very important. So these two groups, they debated with each other, and they were boiled eventually down to 5 points, and then that went to a council, and the council took 35 years to rule on this. And of course, they ruled in favor of the Mahasangika, because they're the ones that are saying, hey, we're going to stick to the original rules, even though they might not have been following them. So this split happened. They said if the Stavira monks, they don't want to follow the Mahasangika, they're welcome to leave. So the Stavira monks said, okay, we will leave. So the Mahasangika monks, they're in the main center in Magadha, in Vasali, and so they're staying where they usually would be residing, and so the Stavira monks, they travel all the way to what is now called Kashmir in Pakistan, and they developed their own monasteries and culture in an area near Taxila. Now, Taxila, it turns out to be the big center of trading on the southern part of what would eventually become the Silk Road. But at that time, it was a very important trading center, and there were lots of people coming and going. And as I said, this is how far Alexander the Great journeyed on his trip to conquer the world. And when so just a little aside here, because this is an area of great interest, Alexander the Great had with him, he had studied with Aristotle when he was a child, so he was very philosophically oriented, and he brought with him a number of philosophers. One of the philosophers that he brought with him was a fellow by the name of Pyrrho, Pyrrho, and Pyrrho and several of the other philosophers ended up interacting with monks who were called gymnosophists or naked monks. And there's a big debate in Buddhism and particularly in Greek philosophy as to who it was that who were these gymnosophists. So in investigating this, there are some people who say the gymnosophists were Buddhists, and there are some people who say the gymnosophists were ascetic monks. So this is an area of great debate. Right now, the Greek philosophers are split on this point. So interesting, and you don't mess around with the Greeks. They're very precise in their study and their research. They are very serious. So they do quite a job of trying to understand this. But going back to the question of the split, we're going to talk more about this split because this is a big point. Now, if we go to the map, the next slide, there's a map that you will see that I put kind of added to some map. Yes, there's the map. So you can see the Mahasangika group in the central eastern portion of India. That's the Magadha region that goes from the Himalayas all the way down to the sea. And then you can see that during the reign of Ashoka, lots of places that the monks were sent to spread Buddhism, including all the way south to Sri Lanka. There are wonderful stories about how the Bodhi tree, cuttings from the original Bodhi tree, ended up in Sri Lanka. Then also, as you look north, you can see that monks were sent, but there were already an established group of monks that were an offshoot of the original split, and this offshoot we're going to come to know as the Sarvastivadins. So we're going to now move to the next slide. So originally they say there were 18 early schools of Buddhism, but there's actually more than that. In this, you can see the split between the Mahasangika and the Stavira Nikaya, and how the Stavira Nikaya split off into three main groups or four groups, and then one of those main groups is the Sarvastivadins, and the Sarvastivadins split into many different groups, and one of those groups we will know as Sautrantika. And then Sautrantika actually split off as well, and you can see that eventually becomes Yogacara. And if you follow the other splits, you can see that we have the Theravadins that are also influenced by the Sarvastivadins, and the Madhyamikas, who actually there should be a line also up to the Mahasangikas. So they're influenced by both. So there's a lot of different influences and interactions between. It's not just a steady one-to-one kind of interconnection. A lot of these schools are interacting with each other and transformations are happening. So it's not a straight line, but it's, in order to make it comprehensible to the mind, trying to make it a little bit clearer. And even this is complicated. Okay. So here, even a straighter line in the next slide, we can see the importance of Sarvastivadins and how they get to the Sotrantikas and the Mahisaka group. The Mahishasaka group that eventually was the group that Sangha was ordained in, became Chittamatra, and then Vasubandhu's involved in this. He's from the Sautrantika school, as he's the ancestor who's number 21 in the sequence. You need to kind of notice that there are these numbers that keep coming up. Number 1, leading the Buddha, the Sangha, and then, of course, number 14, Nagarjuna, now number 21, Vasubandhu, and then number 28, 7 later, we get to Bodhidharma. But here we have Vasubandhu, and then Asanga and Vasubandhu come together and they form this Yogacara school. And then from this, there are other people, logicians that come and have called the reasoning school. But this is a story for another seminar that I will not give. Okay. So now in the next slide, we're going to look at Mahisangika's split during the Second Council. And I already told you a little bit about the committee that had to make a decision about the breakaway. So here I just have a written version of, and we go to the next slide. This is just a written version of the commentary that I just gave you so that you can look and research this on your own. You can go to the next slide. There is a legend called the Mahideva legend that tries to explain this split, but it probably is not, it's not accurate. So if those people will run across and say, oh, this is the reason why they split, probably not accurate. He makes a point about certain things that were probably not true. The bottom line, as I said, was probably money was maybe the contentious point. So if you want to come up with the problems and what causes them, just follow the money, as they say. The next slide I'm going to look at is languages. So the Stavira group, they used a language that I'm totally not fluent in, the Paishakchi language. I never heard of this. The Mahasangikas, they use Prakrit. That's a good language. You find that many of the Agama actually have been translated not from the Sanskrit, but also from the Prakrit. And sometimes when you get different versions of the Agama, they may come from the Prakrit and some from the Sanskrit. And then the Sarvastivadins, they use the Sanskrit. And of course, we know the Theravadins relied more on the original Pali. Next slide. We should not dismiss the Mahasangikas too quickly, because the Mahasangikas were also very interested in what would eventually become Mahayana Buddhism. They had many ideas about how there was a Bodhisattva path in addition to an Arhat path. And they also had different views on the Buddhas and the Arahats, and many of these points would later become areas of debate. So we should not dismiss the Mahasangikas. They also had a strong influence on Nagarjuna as well. And they accepted the later sutras much earlier than any of the other schools, particularly the Theravada school that basically just wanted to stick with the original Pali. So we have to give credit to the Mahasangikas. They weren't just a troublesome group. They had many great teachers as well. But our interest is in the Sarvastivadins. because they're the ones that would give rise to Yogacara. So the next slide, we can see the Sarvastivadin, you're in the right place, the Sarvastivadin slide here now, subdivisions. I present this information here for you for those people who want to understand the nuances of the different schools that came from the original split. But I think that for our purposes, if we get into this, we'll never get to our main point. So I'm just going to just show you that I have the slides. If we go to the next slide, you can see I given you some additional information about comparing the schools of Sarvastivadin, Sautrantika, Yogacara, and Theravadin. You can see some of the main points so that you can go back and you can look at this. The main thing about Sarvastivadin school is that they had an interesting viewpoint about that one goes back to the original teachings of the Buddha. When the Buddha talked about no self, he discussed this in great detail, not self, in many of the suttas. But the Buddha never specifically talked about dharmas and whether dharmas were empty in character, like we know that we studied that we say this in the Heart Sutra. The original Buddhist sutras do not talk about that so much. So the Sarvastivadins said, well, there are real dharmas, there are real phenomenons in the past and in the present and in the future. These things are all real. The self is not real, but all of these other things are real. So this became an area of great debate. So then when the Sautrantikas came along, they said, no, this is too much. Dharmas exist only in the present, not in the past and not in the future, only in the present. So this became this is one of the main points of split between the Sarvastivadins and the Sautrantikas. But then when Yogacara comes along, you're going to see that all dharmas, whether they're past, present, and future, they're all empty of inherent reality. None of them are real. So we need to understand the language a little bit so that we have a better understanding. Because back in this time, they did not have quantum physics. They didn't have advanced neuroscience. So when they were talking about things existing on a different level, they didn't know that all dharmas, all phenomena, all objects are actually jumping in and out of existence. To remind us all, because our senses are so strong, particularly our vision sense is so strong, it convinces us that all of our objects are real. Well, they're real because our energy level and the energy level of the table are close, so very close. So we're made of fermions. Quarks are part of fermions, and so are subatomic particles. Just to go back, we have inside of every object, including ourselves, we have molecules, cells, and atoms, and inside the atoms, there's neutrons, or protons, electrons. Inside of those are subatomic particles. And these subatomic particles, we know, are jumping in and out of existence. They're going into energy and then into matter, and they're doing this at a very, very fast rate. Our eyes can only see things that are slower than about 24 hertz. And this is 2.6 times 10 to the 26 power hertz is how fast the matter is jumping, converting back and forth. So we can't see that. The electron microscope can't see it. You have to have a hadron collider and amazing abilities to be able to just see the after effects of protons hitting each other and particles splitting off. This is very difficult for us to see this, but we know that it's real. We know that that is the reality. The reality of objects is that they're made mostly out of space, and that whatever small amount of matter is there and fermions, those are jumping in and out of existence. We did not have this information back in the 4th century. So they had to come up with ways of being able to discuss how it is that all dharmas are empty. So they had to use different understanding. Now, when you get to the issue of consciousness, this is another story. So we'll get there. Will help us to try to understand some of this material. Okay, I digress. So Sarvastivadins, we have their school is called is named the theory of how all dharmas are real. Yeah, that all dharmas exist. That's what the meaning of the term is. So this is something that's going to get debated, as we say. As we go to the next slide here, there's this legend, Upagupta legend, that that there are some scholars who believe that the Sarvastivadins were supported by the group following Ashoka. Then some people say Ashoka supported the Mahasangikas. But there are other scholars that believe that a community of monks were established by the original patriarch, Upagupta, the ancestor, who I think is number 4 or number 5, depending upon the list that you use. But this, so they said that actually Upagupta went to the Taxila area and founded the Sarvastivadin school himself personally. Okay, so who was Upagupta and how did that come about? We will never know. So the Sautrantikas, really meaning those who rely upon the sutras, those down there looking at the sutras that were developed by Nagarjuna and also combining them with the original Pali sutras. And they split from the Sarvastivadins probably around somewhere around 200 CE. So the Sarvastivadins were very, very influential from about 300 BCE, so about 500 years, so quite an extended period of time. And then this group first appears in the Abhidhamma Kosha Basaya. This is a commentary on the Abhidhamma Kosha that was written by Asanga, and then the commentary by Vasubandhu, and then expanded upon by those in the Sautrantika school. So the split in the next slide of over this point of what exists and what doesn't exist, the extension of this problem from matter to consciousness was a very important part of the teaching. So let me digress for a moment here and just say a few things. In the understanding of what we're made of, the original Buddhist teaching is that we're made up of 5 parts. You all remember the 5 skandhas: form, feeling, perception, conception, mental formations, and consciousness. We have these 5 parts. So consciousness is what we're interested in this particular class. Now, consciousness is part of the stream of how things are held together, of the 5 skandhas. Sentience is held together by this this consciousness. And understanding what consciousness is a very important investigation of Yogacara. Now, in the original Buddhist schools, remember that consciousness is something that is investigated at the highest level of what we call the formless jhanas. Remember, we're all living in this desire realm, and we're caught by our senses, our sense-based data. And we're trying to gratify our sense-based data. It's our senses, the sense-based data, and we keep trying over and over again. If only my senses are gratified, then I'll be a happy person. I won't suffer anymore. And people go through many, many lifetimes convinced that this kind of craving is what's going to lead to the cessation of suffering, until they have this realization, oh no, this hasn't been working for thousands of lifetimes. It's certainly not working in this lifetime either. Doesn't matter how much money you have, how much power and wealth and fame you have, doesn't work out so well. I'm going to tell a very quick story here because I think stories are very helpful. If any of you ever come to visit me at my office or my home, my office is in my house now, and you go along Ladue Road, you'll go past, I don't have pictures of this, but you'll go past a very large estate called Hunter Farm. Hunter Farm, owned by the Hunter family. The Hunter family, founded by Old Man Hunter in 1947. Which happens to be a very good year. That was the year that in this lifetime for me, at the beginning. So 1947, a good year, I guess. So he founded this business because he had discovered and then patented the way to balance wheels on cars. So, you know, when you get a car, you get wheels, all the wheels have to be balanced. If you get a new tire, it has to be put on the rim, it has to be balanced. Now it's done by computers. Originally, it was done manually. In both cases, the patent for that is owned by the Hunter engineering firm out by the airport. So you can imagine how many wheels there are in the world. You can imagine how much money the Hunter family made from this patent. So they built this huge estate on Ladue Road, on either side of Ladue Road by Woods Mill. And on one side, they raised cattle, and on the other side, a big compound with different houses where all the sons and daughters could live with good financial security. And there are places, there are lakes there. You can go, the Hunter family would go out with their guns and they would shoot birds or whatever. One day, Old Man Hunter, so successful, went out hunting, sat down by the lake, admiring it, and he blew his brains out, killed himself. Old Man Hunter, he could balance every wheel in the world, but he could not balance one wheel. It's this one in his mind. So he never learned how to turn this wheel. Only the Buddha could teach us how to turn this wheel. Okay, coming back. Okay, I hope you don't, my stories are okay. So when we look at the consciousness, we see that this consciousness, we have to understand what this consciousness is about. So when we go into the formless realm, the first formless realm, I didn't make a slide on this, is infinite spaciousness. The second one, infinite consciousness, and so forth. So when we're studying Yogacara, we need to see that what we're studying is a deeper examination of this particular aggregate of consciousness. Okay, So let's go back now. So Trantaka is trying to understand this, and they begin to develop an understanding of the fact that inside of this consciousness that we have, there have to be what are called seeds, bija. And these seeds contain karma. And this karma is something that is not limited to the body or to a lifetime. This karma, as the Buddha talks about, goes from life to life. So we need to be able to see this stream of consciousness as not limited to just this physical body. It goes beyond that. Okay, going back to our slides. So this is what the Sautrantikas began to investigate and to understand. Okay. And this is what caused their split. Then there is the Mahishasaka school that Sangha was involved in, which was really an offshoot of the Sautrantikas. Again, they had some different ideas. They actually wore blue robes and they did a lot of meditation. And their meditation was focused on the Four Noble Truths. And this is what Asanga was involved in. And then Asanga eventually formed initially his own school. And I'll tell you a little bit about this, the Chitta Mantra school, which eventually became part of with Vasubandhu Yogacara. So there's a little story. So when Asanga was practicing this meditation, he thought to himself, you know, I'm really not very enlightened. I need to go off into the mountains and practice and see how much progress I can make. So he went off into the mountains for 10 years. Now, during that time, Vasubandhu, the 28th ancestor, he's running all of the schools. He's running the Sautrantika school. And Asanga, his brother, he's off in the mountains meditating. And after 10 years, he comes back and he says to himself, you know, I don't know if I've made any progress at all. So I better go back and join society and be of whatever benefit I can be. I don't want to become like an ascetic monk who just is self-absorbed. I need to go back and help others to the extent that I can, even though I'm not really enlightened. So on his journey back to Nalanda, where Vasubandhu was, he stopped along the side of the road and he saw a dog lying on the road. And this dog was injured. He had a big gaping wound. And when he looked more closely at the wound, he saw maggots eating at the dog's leg. And Vasubandhu was and Asanga was moved to great compassion, just thinking, oh, how much distress this dog is in. Maybe I can do something to help this dog. So he took out his eating utensil and he cut off a part of his own flesh from his thigh and laid it on the ground. And then, not wanting to hurt even the maggots, he used his tongue to move the maggots from the wound to his own flesh. So this is the legend. At that moment, the dog turns into Maitreya, the next Buddha. And he says to Asanga, he says, only either a crazy person or an enlightened person would do such a thing as you've just done. And you're not crazy. I am going to help you do the teaching. So Maitreya then, in his invisible form, hops on the shoulder of Asanga, and the two of them go to Nalanda. And Asanga, goes to see his brother. But his brother, even though he hasn't seen him in 10 years, he just says, oh, I'm so happy to see you, but I have so much work to do. I have so many papers to grade. I have so many monks to teach. Oh, I'm so involved in this. I can't really talk to you right now. So Asanga keeps trying to explain to him the real teaching that he was illuminated by during his meditation and by his experience with Maitreya, the next Buddha, and Vasubandhu. He doesn't have time. He's too busy. So Asanga tries to use skillful means. He says to his brother, he says, oh, brother, I am dying. I have to take to my bed. Well, that got Vasubandhu's attention. He says, oh, no. What can I do to help you? So he says, oh, not much you can do. I'm just going to lay down and pass away slowly. But I know I'm dying. Vasubandhu came to visit him every night, concerned about him. Is there something I can do? Is there something I can do? And Asanga said, well, what you could do is you could read to me out of this book. This was the text that Asanga had written during his period of retreat, the Abhidhamma Kosha. So he started reading this book, and as Vasubandhu read the book to his brother dying, he became enlightened. He realized his mistake. He said, oh, this is marvelous. This is the great teaching. Thank you so much. And as soon as he did that, Asanga got up out of his bed. He said, oh, brother, you said you were dying. He says, oh, yes, we're all dying. So for those people who are familiar with Mahayana Buddhism and the Sutras, you know that this story is duplicated in a very famous sutra called Vimalakirti Sutta, which is a little bit controversial in the monastic community. And I won't go into the reason for that. That's a story for another day. But this story of monks saying that they're dying and getting people to pay attention is an old story. So passed on from generation to generation. So we're happy that Asanga stuck around for a while and taught Vasubandhu. Okay, going to the next slide. So now we're going to Yogacara. Finally, after almost an hour, we're going to now get into Yogacara. So we've been studying along together, getting the background, and now we're getting ready to go into the real teachings. Perfect timing. Corey, are you calling for another break, or do we go forward?
I think Corey just took a break.
Well, Corey's in charge. Oh, Corey already took his break.
Yeah.
Okay.
Corey
So,
turned off.
I don't know. Maybe he needed to use the restroom. No problem. We will not call anybody into question.
Oh, there he is.
Okay, Corey, is this a good time for a break?
Sure. Sorry,
Okay.
I dropped something on the floor and my headphones didn't reach.
Oh no, that's fine. So we're another hour in. So if we're is this good? Also, Caddy, should we take a break now or push forward?
Let's take a break for 10 minutes.
Very good. 10-minute break. I will see you. And for those of you who have learned enough and you don't want to go forward into the weeds, that's perfectly fine. The rest of you put on your what do they call them? The hip waders that when you go walking into the swamp, you need your hip waders, right?
I'm gonna go search for a dog with maggots on it.
Oh, very good. All right. We will see each other soon. Okay. And then with good stories too. Maybe one day we'll have someone will give a class. Maybe you will give a class on Madhyamaka. And you can study along with the Dalai Lama the chapters of the texts in the fundamental wisdom of the middle way. So those would be more stories. Absolutely good stories to tell. Yep.
No comment.
Yeah. There's so much material that it would be easy for me just to give just all the material and no stories. And there are so many stories, I could just give stories and no material. Try to do a balance. Yes. So as we come back together again, are there any questions that people have so far? I did a lot of work to try to understand the split between the Mahasangikas and eventually the Sarvastivadins, and I hope I made that clear, because that's a complicated mess. If you ever try to read the scholars on this, oh my gosh, the complexity of this is to boil it down into something that's just a couple of slides. That took a lot of hours. I can just tell you. Probably Caddy realizes how difficult that material is.
Yes, I had a hard time searching through. I do have a question, Don, about, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the book that Asanga had Vasubandhu, read, or actually another version of it is that Asanga pretended he was sick, and then he asked one of his students to kind of chant the book, in the next room that Vasubandhu was staying. So that's another version. But the book, I think it's the Yogacara Bhumi Sastra, not the Kosa, because Abhidhamma Kosa was composed by Vasubandhu.
I think that he did I think he did the Bayesa. He did the commentary. The original Abhidhamma Kosa, I think, is by Asanga, but we should check it.
Okay. Okay.
I think
correct me if I'm wrong.
So I think that, see, there are two texts. There's the Abhidhamma Kosa and then the Abhidhamma Kosa commentary, the Bayesa. So we can look at that.
We can check that.
And it could have been that maybe he might have been, although I think it was composed later, the Middle Beyond Extremes. I think that was composed later. So, but you may be right, because we'll have to look and see,
because the Kosa, as far as when I did the research on that, the Kosa, the Abhidhamma Kosa, was started with the Karika. The Karika is the verses, and then Vasubandhu actually learned that from the Sarvastivadins, and at that time I think, but correct me if I'm wrong, I think the text said that it's from the Maha, what is it? Yesterday I just talked about it. But you're right. There might be two Abhidhamma Kosas. One was composed by Vasubandhu. The other one is from the Sarvastivadins. But let's go back and see, and check on that and see.
Yeah, I can give you that information right now.
Okay.
Because I can put it in. So this is the Jushalun. Yeah, so this is no, that's a different text. Hold on. It won't be so easy to find. If I can't find it in 1 minute, then we'll go on.
That's okay, but we can, go back and compare notes later on.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Maybe.
Yeah, because the Kosa is actually from the Sarvastivadins. At that time, they were not considered as Mahayana Sutras.
Yeah. So maybe it was another text that he may have been chanting. Maybe another text. That could be. Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
No, I just
Very,
wonder,
very helpful.
did I do, did I study it incorrectly? So thank you for bringing this up. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll try to figure all of this stuff out. Lots of commentaries.
Yes. Yes.
Maybe, and I don't know if Sherry has any information about this or not.
What was the question again? I missed it.
I don't know. It's too complicated. So the question was, what book would it have been that a Sangha either was having recited or was having Vasubandhu read while he was in the bed?
I don't remember. I guess I might even say the Abhidhamma Samachaya, but
Okay.
I don't know.
Don, real quick, what I kind of was away. What was one of the splits? You said there was a legend, and then you said follow the money. We'll never know, but you can follow the money. What was the name of that again?
Well, this was just the split that happened between the Savara group and the Mahasangika group. It's in the slide. I think if you go back and you look at the slide, I tried to explain everything in the slide so that you could go back and review it.
Okay.
Yes.
And then Gupta, how do you spell that? Is it
Gupta? It's also in the slide.
Okay, thanks.
You'll find them in there.
The other one that didn't answer, but for your physics stuff, how do you double blind test for the observer effect? So I haven't had anybody answer that, but that's beyond this scope. So okay.
Yes, the observer is part of the experiment. That's why it's called relativity.
Yes, and you can't double blind test for that. So
no.
Throws that out the window in science, right?
Yes. Okay. So if you want to find the answer to that question, you're going to have to read Gödel, Godel.
The philosopher, yeah.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So he will give you the explanation for that in his criticism of Whitehead and Russell's Principia Mathematica. It's contained in there. Okay. So
thank you.
Sure. So now we're going to go into Yogacara. So again, we need to not be goal oriented. We're going to do our best. And as an old professor, I know where to skip. So I know I have kind of an idea of where I want to get to in this set of slides and in the next set of slides. So trust the driver here. I now have new contact lenses and I'm capable of driving, and that's a good thing. So I'm going to try to negotiate and drive us through. But like my wife, when she gets into the car with me, she wants to know if our life insurance is intact, and she holds a pillow up just in case something happens. So we'll do our best here. All right. So let's hang on for the ride here. Put on your seatbelts because here we go. Okay. So this word, Vijniptimatra, I'm not going to pronounce that for you yet. That's part of the journey. Okay, that's one of the street signs that we're going to be looking for on our trip. When we see that sign, that means that we have to always take that exit and get onto the next road. So that's that particular road, but I'm not going to pronounce it for you because I struggled for many years to pronounce it, and I'm not going to make it easy on you. Okay, so here's a map. On the next slide, this is a map of the division of the Vajrayana, the Mahasangika, and the Theravadan, the Mahayana and the Theravadan groups. So in the orange, we have Tibet and Mongolia, which is the Tibetan school. And then the yellow, we have the Mahayana school. And in the red, we have the Theravadan school. So this gives us a little bit of an understanding in Asia of how things get split up. Now, even though the Tibetan school looks like it covers as much surface area as the Chinese Mahayana school, you have to understand the population density is slightly different. Lots of desert in Tibet and Mongolia. Okay. So now we're going into a little understanding of Mahayana Buddhism. So Yogacara and Madhyamaka and Tathagatagarbha, all of these schools actually are synthesized in what we call Chan Buddhism. There should be an accent on the Chan, but I couldn't, there are too many references and I didn't want to get into changing all the slides. So Chan Buddhism, Korean and Seon, Japanese Zen, then we have the Pure Land, the Tian Tai, we have the Shingon, we have Tibetan Buddhism. All of these schools draw upon Yogacara, Madhyamaka, and Tathagatagarbha. So all of these schools synthesize or make an effort to do that. So that's why Yogacara is so important. Now, I wanted to show you this slide because we go back to the story of Upagupta, who is number 4 in this particular slide. Upagupta is the person who presided over the 3rd council. We believe that somehow or other he ended up maybe in Taxila, but the dates must have been different for him. But in any event, I wanted to make to show you the first 28. Oh, my numbering system got all messed up here. I apologize. So we can see that there are several here that are actually possibly. We have Buddha Mitra, who is number 9, and my numbering system here, number 13, would have been Bhikshu, female, and so that the teacher of Nagarjuna may have been female. We don't know the answer whether she was a bhikkhuni or a monk. We're not sure of some of these things. So there are different debates on this subject. Nagarjuna, specifically, we know the head of the Madhyamaka school, number 14. So then we go up again, starting at 15, and we go down to number 21, Vasubandhu, and then we get to number 28, Bodhidharma, and then the lineage for the Chan school starts again with number 1. And of course, we remember number 4, Daoshin, who also was connected either for real or legendarily with Farong, who did the Sinming that was like the Sung San before him, the Faith in Mind, the Sin Sing Ming. And then we have number 6, Huineng. So very important monk who dispersed Buddhism in the Southern school and had many, many important followers, Mazu, Baizhang, and then many great composers of the Gung'an, the koans, the riddles. I added a few of those. And then finally to Master Linji, who was the lineage, the master of the Renzai school, or the Linji school. And then in this, now we have this lineage that goes down. We have all the way down to Dahui, number 22 in the lineage after this school, number 12 in the lineage of Linji. And then I don't have the information. Venerable Kongshi and I have talked about this several times, and I've seen some Chinese pieces of paper that have some lineage filled in. But because Buddhism got very dispersed, and there really, people had preceptors and different teachers, the names of the great masters, there were multitudes of them, And so we don't have exact straightforward lineage from Dahui all the way to our modern time. So here in our school, we have number 41 is Jumo, number 42, Master Jiru. Yeah, maybe you've heard of this fellow. All right, so he would be number 80 in the lineage from the Buddha. So we should say something about Dahui. He was a very important teacher of the Linji school, and he had 2,000 students. And at the time of his death, he said, well, it's time for me to die, so I have to write a verse. This is what we do in our school. So without a verse, I could not die. So this is his verse. Birth is thus, death is thus. Verse or no verse, what's the fuss? I really like this. Whoever translated it did a great job. Yes. So there are these 5 houses of the Zen school. I won't go into all of this. I'm just letting you know that there are these different lineages, and the next. So we're going on to a few more slides here. If you go forward. Francesca can go forward, maybe. Yes, there's Dahui, and then the next one, we have his verse, and then we have the houses, and then the next slide after that, I should say next, of course, and there we are, the 5 houses, and then we can go to the next slide, and then we have the 20th century lineage of the Chinese masters. I just did my best to try to put together the importance of Taishu, difficult for me to pronounce his name, but he has a number of important disciples. So the disciple that eventually becomes the head of Foguan Shan, the disciple of Inshun, who eventually becomes female disciple, who becomes the leader of the Tzuchi school, and Master Jiru here. And then we have Master Sheng Yen, the Dharma drum. And then we have the master of the Chengtai school. And then we also have the master who started the city of 10,000 Buddhas, who was a disciple of Empty Cloud. So as you can see, the dispersal of these that happens during different times where there's a great master, and then many schools, many emerge as a result. So I just wanted to share this so that you can see some of the background and where Maba fits. Okay, so now we're going to come back to Yogacara. I keep promising you to go back there, giving you a chance to put on your waders, all right, your boots. So Yogacara through Asanga and Vasubandhu. So here we have the great teachers, Asanga, Vasubandhu, and etc., all the way to Xuanzang and Huiji. And we have Asanga Wu Zhou. No attachment is his name. I really like his name. If I knew him, I would say, oh, master, no attachment. I want to study with you. And Vasubandhu means worldly relative. It's good to study with him as well. I don't know, I think when the slides got sent over, his picture got too small. All right, here's a Sangha, and as we've explained, I gave you some stories about him, and there's some familiarization. And then in the next slide, next 2 slides, you can see some of the teachings that he gave. And then in the next slide, we have Vasubandhu and his involvement as the 21st ancestor. And then the next store is some of the work that Vasubandhu did as well. And here we can see the first reference to a text called the Trimsika. So this Trimsika, these are the 30 verses of consciousness only. And this is going to be what it is that we're going to be discussing. So as you can see, this is next slide is just a repeat of the evolution of Yogacara, and then some information of Dignata and Dharmapala that I'm just going to skip through. Xuanzang I've talked about, Nagarjuna, and Vasubandhu, I've talked about him as well. And now I'm going to go to that. Oh, we're at the right slide here. Here is Nagarjuna and Xuanzang. There are two great contributions. And I want to talk now about Nagarjuna and the fundamental wisdom of the middle way. So this is the first verse from the fundamental wisdom of the middle way. So if you don't have any Advil close by, be sure you have it nearby, because you'll need it after this verse. Neither from itself, nor from another, nor from both, nor without a cause does anything whatsoever anywhere arise. Okay. This is not a class on Nagarjuna. Thank goodness we can move forward. Okay. The second verse. All right. I broke it down because I'm not happy, as I said, with Jay Garfield's translation, but I've given you Jay Garfield's translation here. There are four conditions. He calls efficient condition, percept object condition, immediate condition, and the dominant condition. I'll discuss with you how the causal condition. The next one, it's better just to use the original Sanskrit alambana, because because alambana has so many levels of meaning. No one knows what the word percept object means. I've talked to cognitive psychologists. They're not familiar with this terminology. What does this mean? So we should really go investigating alambana. Fortunately, one of the important teachings of Yogacara is about alambana, so we'll have an opportunity to go into that. Then the immediately preceding condition, it's not just, they say the immediate moment, but it's really the whole sequence of moments. And then the dominant condition, really any kind of environmental condition. I'll go into this. And then Nagarjuna says something very profound, very unlike him, because Nagarjuna doesn't make many assertions, but here he makes an assertion. Just so, there is no fifth condition. So this is the second verse. Okay, so what are these conditions? So we have this primary causal condition, we have this alambana condition, we have the immediately preceding sequence of moments, and then we have the environmental miscellaneous conditions. And in the Nagarjuna text, he gives equal weight to all four of these conditions. But when you open up the Chengwei Shalun and you see Xuanzang, he has a couple of pages on the Hetu, a couple of pages on Anatana, he has a couple of pages on Adipati, but he has many pages on alambana. It's a separate category, its own chapter, and there's a reason for that. Okay, so the Hetu condition is the event that triggers the actual sequence of events. Now, connecting us to our past karma. In Madhyamaka, that's what is said. But in Yogacara, they are much more specific, and they say this has to do with the bijas, with the seeds found in the Alaya Vijnana, the eighth consciousness. We'll get into that. I'm just dropping some references here so that when I get into it, you'll be familiar. The second one that I want to talk about is the immediately preceding condition. What happened just before this took place? Between the causal condition and your current, it's not before the causal condition, it's before the current condition. And then the next one is, what are the additional factors in the environment that are internal and external affecting the event? And then the alambana is, how does the person actually perceive the event? What is the sensory, perceptual, conceptual, habitual state of mind that leads to the person to have a reaction, or we might use the word choice. And this connects the person to the next event, to their future karma. So you can see how important alambana is. All right. So that ends that sequence of slides. So we're only 7 minutes late, which is okay. So we're going to move on to the next sequence now. All right, sequence number, we're going to go to number 3. All right, okay. Okay, so 30 verses, part 3. So this will take us up to our lunch break. Is our lunch break at 11:30 or 11:45?
11:45.
11:45. Okay, so we're going to push on through until then. So the 30 verses starts our section here, Chung Wei Shalun, and now we're at the translations. So if Francesca will put up slide number 3 from the third part, if she's found that, that will be great. Those are the blue slides. Okay, all right, so we're on slide number 3 here. We're going to talk about the translations. So this is the text that was translated from the, go back one, from the French. And then the next one is Cook's translation that's in the Numata Center. And then the next slide we can see is the commentary written by Dan Lusthouse at Harvard on Buddhist phenomenology that I referenced. The next one is Thich Nhat Hanh's commentary that's actually the same book published under 2 titles. One is called The Transformation at the Base, and you'll see why it is that he used that term later. And Understanding Our Mind, which is the second version. It's the identical, and it's actually Thich Nhat Hanh writes in verse and then gives commentary to his own verses. So this is really an exciting book to understand the mental factors and also to understand how to get into the Chung Wei Shalun. So this is a really very, very helpful text. The next one is our story from Wei Tat's translation, the Chung Wei Shalun. This is the cover. As I said, I took my cover off because it was getting a little tattered. So I wanted to tell you the story, as Francesca had mentioned, about how I came to this teaching. So when, as you may know, when I first came to Maba, first visit was for Vesak Day. I think it was around 2000, somewhere around there, 2001. I don't remember exactly. So I was studying Tibetan Buddhism at the time, and my friends took me to Maba. I didn't know that it even existed. And as soon as I arrived, I said, this is like home. I felt this is the place where I need to study. And I met Venerable Kongshi. And I had met her before at some Buddhist council meetings. And I just felt like she was going to be a very important teacher for me. And then she said, oh, over there sitting at the table, Master Jiru, he's the abbot. But I didn't talk to Master Jiru for 3 years. I just observed him, checking, is he really a master? What is really a master? So I learned really for those 3 years only from Venerable Kongshi and observing. I think observing, you learn a lot. So then one day, we were at a mindfulness day event at the Thai temple, and people split off into different groups to do a meditation. And I decided, okay, I will sit in the group with Master Jiru. Of course, I had heard Master Jiru speak before, but never had I said really anything to him. And after the meditation, short meditation, 15 minutes or so, he said, he went around the room and he said to people, tell me what is in your mind. And people explained their thoughts and what was going on in their mind as they were sitting. And when it came to be my turn, I said, garbage. That's all I said. And then after the meeting, Master and I had a moment, we were leaving the room together. He says, oh, come and let's talk at Maba. I said, okay. So that was my first introduction to Master. And then some years later, the Master and I had been talking, and I kept telling him, oh, I'm a big fan of Madhyamaka. I like Nagarjuna very much. I'm not so sure about Yogacara. I don't know so much about Yogacara. I think I'm just going to stick to Nagarjuna. And one day I'm sitting outside the meditation hall downstairs, as you know, outside on the bench, and Master comes over and he says, he had a bag, and inside the bag, he had a book. And he hands me this book, and he says, I want to give you this book. I need for you to give a talk on the last chapter. And, you know, Master understands I'm an old professor. Somebody tells me to give a talk on something, I just, okay, no problem. I'll give a talk on the last chapter. Shouldn't be too much difficulty. So after the Master left, I said, okay, I can learn from this book. So in the next, I open the book up, and this is the last chapter, and this is what I see. I see this word, Vijnaptimatratra. How do you even say this word? I'm looking at this word. I try to break it up into different parts, and I know that I'm not saying it right. So, okay, well, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'll just read this, and I'll give a talk. And so then I start reading. The Nibbita Bhaga, being a manifestation evolved on the basis of consciousness, is not, like consciousness itself, a real thing included in the Paratantra, or the nature of dependence on others. Were it considered to be real, the principle of this word, mere consciousness, would not be established, since both consciousness and the internal objects would then be real. But there is another doctrine. So this is what I read. And I said, I think I better read the chapter before. So I read the chapter before. It's not any better. I go to the chapter, it's even harder. So I better start at the beginning. So I start at the beginning of the book, and I realized I'm not going to even make sense out of the beginning of this book. So then I start doing some research, and I realize that I need to read first Dan Lesthouse's books on Buddhist phenomenology if I'm going to make any sense out of this. So I read Dan's book, and then at that time, the conditions were in my life that I was being invited to give talks on cognitive behavioral therapy around the country. And I got to go to lots of fun places. And one of the places that I got to go to was my hometown of Boston. So I thought, oh, Boston, that's where Harvard is. I remember my dad went to Harvard, so I know about Harvard. So I'm not afraid of Harvard people. So I call up Dan Lesthouse. I get it, and I say, I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist, professor from Washington University. I'd like to talk with you about the Chung Wei Shalun. I have questions about Alambama. And he says, oh, Alambana, okay, come and meet me for dinner in the north side. We'll get together and we'll have dinner. So I give my presentation and we meet in an Italian restaurant on the north side around 6:30, and we sit down together, and immediately we realize that we have a lot in common and we get along very well, and they kick us out of the restaurant at 12:30 after midnight. We have to close up now. We have to close up and go home. So all that time, so I do my best not to reveal to him that I don't know how to pronounce this word. So eventually, fortunately, we get to that fork in the road where we have to exit to this highway of Mijnata Matrata. Mijnati Matrata. So that's how I learned about Yogacara. So then I came back to St. Louis and I started my study. And one day I got a phone call from Venerable Miao Han, who was at that time the abbot of the Fo Guangzhang Monastery here in St. Louis. And she said, I just talked to Dan Lusthouse at Harvard, and I asked him if he would come to St. Louis to give some teachings on the Changwei Shalun. And he said, well, if you want to start a study group, there's this guy in St. Louis who came to visit me. He's interested in this too. Maybe you guys could have a study group together. So I asked Master what he thought of this idea. Master said, oh, I think it's a good idea. And so we all got together, and I believe that that's where Sherry and I first met. Is that true, Sherry? Is that when we first met?
No, I'd been going to your study groups at Pure Mind Center and at the Buddha place before that. And then you held the book up to Wei Shilun in the study group, and I said, I've been looking for that.
Oh, okay. And then I realized that Sherry knew a lot. And I got a little embarrassed. Oh no, this person knows a lot. I better be careful. So we had a very interesting study group, didn't we?
Yes, we did. And spent several months in the Alambana.
Oh yeah, so we really studied hard together, and we learned a lot, and we had a good time learning together. But I continued my study after this group, so because I don't know if I knew so much back then, I now I know less than I did then. So let's talk about the Trimsika, the 30 verses of consciousness. Okay, all right, perfect. Only 5 minutes behind now. Okay, so 30 verses. Okay, so let's go to the slide that says the 30 verses. Next slide. All right, next slide is good. Next slide after that. Okay, so this 30 verses on consciousness only is the root text upon which the Changwei Shalun is based. And the Chinese title will literally translate in Sanskrit, as you can see, the Trimsika Vijnapti Matrata Shastra, or the commentary on these 30 verses on mere consciousness or mind-only consciousness. So we're going to get into the word Vijnapti a little bit later, and why this word is used rather than some of the other uses of words for mind, because there's a particular reason for that. So this is the production of how all conditioned phenomena arise from the Alaya Vijnana through the transformations of consciousness, and then we learn how to eliminate these illusions so that we can attain enlightenment. This is the Yogacara method. We want to eliminate the illusions. When the illusions are eliminated, the hindrances have been dispelled, then that's how we enter into enlightenment. So enlightenment is not something that you gain. Enlightenment is something that occurs when you get rid of the stuff that's in the way. So the structure of this Vasubandhu's 30 verses, as you can see, first one is on the Atman and the Dharmas, the self and phenomenon, and how these are not real. And then the next verses are on the Aleya Vijnana, the Manas and the Mano Vijnana, the 8th, 7th, and 6th consciousnesses, and then the first 5 consciousness. So this is organized from the top down. And then he goes into the how we perceive objects through our perception, and then into the discussion of the 3 natures of existence, and then into mere consciousness and talking about the paths to transformation. So this is really how this is structured. So if we were going to spend many, many hours together, we would go through all of this, but we're just going to do a little introduction. So we're going to now go to the first original 6 verses. So when you look at Vijnati Matrata Siddhi, the understanding or the explanation, the expounding on these verses, let's look at the first verse. Okay. Concepts of Atman, that's the self, and Dharmas, phenomenon, do not imply the existence of a real Atman and real Dharmas, but merely fictitious constructions produced by numerous causes. Because of this, all varieties of phenomenal experience and qualities arise. The phenomenon of Atman and Dharmas, self and phenomenon, are all mental representations based on the manifestations and transformations of consciousness. Consciousnesses capable of unfolding or manifesting themselves may be grouped together in 3 general categories. Oh my gosh. So how to unpack this is not so easy, particularly to begin to see that everything that we're experiencing is a mental representation is not so easy. It's actually easier for us now because in the 21st century or in the 20th century, we became aware that when we see things neurologically, we don't see the object itself through vision. We have some kind of stimulus out here. Light hits the stimulus. The stimulus is vibrating at a certain level. This vibration at a certain level is then presented to the eye. And if your eye is better than mine, I hope it is, you have a lens. My lens is gone, fallen out, decay, but I have extra lenses on the outside, special now that I can see. But I know that this happens, and then focused on the retina, on an area of the retina called the macula, in even more detail in an area called the fovea. The information is then translated into electrical impulses in the rods and cones through phototransduction in the optic nerve area of the retina, and then that information is sent through the optic nerve, along the optic chiasm, along through the lateral geniculate nucleus, along optic radiations to an area of the occipital lobe where in Brodmann areas 17, 18, and 19, we have the visual center, and a mental representation of the object is reconstructed based on all of these mediated factors. So if we had a different sense organ, we would see things very differently. We know if you're a cricket, you're going to see the world differently. We know that if you had electron microscopes for eyeballs, you would see the world differently. If you were able to have a Large Hadron Collider, you would see the world very differently. As a child, my father was a biochemist, and he taught me the laws of thermodynamics and the Pauli exclusion principle. So it wasn't difficult when these ideas were presented. I said, oh, this makes perfect sense. This is exactly what neuroscience and physics is talking about. But back in those days, they didn't have neuroscience and physics. So they couldn't say the phenomenon of Atman and Dharmas are mental representations based on these, of the way the mind is processing things. So they could only use certain terminology. They use this terminology of consciousness to help us to understand realms of consciousness. Eye consciousness, ear consciousness. We don't talk that way now. We know there are neural networks. Okay. Second verse. So he said 3 general categories. So the 3 general, I broke it down for us. I made 1, 2, 3, but in the text it's not listed that way. Consciousness whose fruit mature at various times. This is the 8th storehouse consciousness called the Alaya Vijnana. Vijnana means consciousness. Alaya means storehouse. And then there's that consciousness that cogitates or deliberates. We're going to get into this. This is the part of the consciousness that creates what we think of as the self. The 7th are thought-centered consciousness, the manas, and the manas believe that the Alaya Vijnana is the self, but it's actually created by this consciousness called the manas. But it takes as its object the Alaya Vijnana. And then the consciousness that perceives and discriminates between the spheres of objects. This is the 6th consciousness that gets the information from the 5 consciousness. This is called the Mano Vijnana, the 5s that gets the information from the 5 sense consciousnesses. Okay. I'm going to stop right here for a moment, and I'm going to ask if anybody has any confusion about these 8 consciousnesses so far. Is everybody okay? Give me a thumbs up if you're sort of with me. Okay, thumbs down if you're having trouble. Okay. Maybe in the middle thumb. Okay, all right. Okay. Continuing on. All right. The 3rd verse. It is impossible to comprehend completely. Oh, I feel better now. What it holds and receives, its place or locality, and its power of perception and discrimination. Oh, okay, now he's using this word vijnapti again. All right, we'll get into this later. It is at all times associated with the 5 mental attributes, the chetas. So we're going to have to explain this one in a moment. I'm going to get there. Namely, mental contact, attention, sensation, conception, and volition. Sparsa, etc., all the way to Chaitanya. We're going to talk about this. But it's always associated with the sensation of indifference. I don't like that translation of upeksha. It's really equanimity. So that's my only dispute with Tat's translation. Okay, so now we're going to explain a few things because this verse has many layers. So now, here we go. This is a chart that I've made to try to help explain things. Where the mind, okay, is divided, here we have the form. These are the 5 aggregates: feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. And now these different 5 aggregates have the quality of being able to experience things in the world we're interconnected with. We have form, sound, smells, taste, touch, and dharmas. And these are the data fields. And then we have the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind that experience these things. The word imagination should be dharmas there. I apologize for error in the slide. And then our phenomenon, and then the consciousness. We have eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind consciousness. These all together are called the 18 constituents that make up what's called, we're going to call the mono consciousness of perception and conception. And then we're going to shift over to mental formation. And then this mental formation now is supported by what are called mental factors, cheta. So now we're going to go into the cheta. So everybody's with me so far, how this is broken down and how we're now, the perception is broken down into the 18 constituents, and the mental formations or habitual patterns are now going to go into the mental factors. Next slide. Okay, so the next slide, I am thankful to Emily Sue of Churseling in San Francisco. This is the group of people who study with the Lama, who is connected with the Dalai Lama, and someone who went into a 3-year retreat. Emily Sue came back from this retreat and gave a presentation online of this is before Zoom, on the mental factors. And I was fortunate that I found out about this and I took her class, amazing class. And then I was traveling around giving talks, so I ended up in San Francisco. And one of the things that I made sure that I did was just go a day early so that I could study directly with Emily and got to know her. She drove me back to Palo Alto, where I was giving my talk by Stanford, and on our long talk, we had some time together, and we started our online communication with each other. And she's given me permission to use her chart because it's so well put together. So I'm very grateful to her. So we have 6, so this is the Yogacara division of the 51 mental factors, sometimes called 52 mental factors, but I'm not sure where the extra one comes in. But what we're interested in here from the previous verse, we talked about the omnipresent mental factors of feeling, discrimination, intention, contact, and attention. And that's what was being referenced in the 3rd verse by Vasubandhu. Okay, I'm going to go back to the 3rd verse just for a moment and to say it's impossible to comprehend these things because they're all times associated with the 5 mental factors or mental attributes. And these 5 attributes are these omnipresent mental factors. Now, when I took this course, it was 16 weeks long. So obviously we can't get into, each one was several hours. So we're not going to get into all of this, but we'll go to the next slide. Okay. Well, one thing I should say here, the word for intention here is chaitana. And the word chaitana means impulse. It's an intention in the present moment that just takes you to the next moment. It's not the samkhita intention right intention in the Eightfold Path. That's a different word. So we shouldn't get those two confused. Although when your chaitana, your momentary intention is connected with your long-term samkhita, volitional, that's of renunciation, no ill will, harmlessness, then you know that you're on the right path. But here it's just impulse, that word. Okay. So now we're on to verse number 5. Okay. Take a breath. It belongs to the non-defiled, non-defined moral species. Oh my gosh, what does that mean? The same is true in the case of mental contact and so forth for all of these omnipresent mental factors. And then now the big phrase, it is perpetually manifesting itself like a torrent. Wow. That's the alaya vijnana, is that storehouse consciousness is perpetually manifesting itself like a torrent and is renounced. It ceases to be called the alaya in the state of arhatship, or as we will come to understand Buddha, a moment of enlightenment, because they didn't have specific term at that moment. That would come later, the term for the bodhisattva bhumi. So this is renounced here in the state of arhatship. That's where the mind goes into the formless realm. Okay. Everybody okay so far? All right. Okay. So I need to talk about this term, non-defiled, non-defined moral species. Oh my gosh. So there are these 4 moral determinants that are explained by Xuanzang. So moral determinants, we know in the Buddhist teaching, we talk about wholesome and unwholesome. Everybody knows about this. But then there are these what are called defiled indeterminants. Okay. That which in its nature is neutral. It's neither good nor bad, but which nevertheless impedes the path for the aspirants and makes the mind impure. A mental function that, although not determinable as good or evil, has contaminated aspects of impeding pure perception of reality. For example, the 4 manifestations of the view of self that are associated with the manas consciousness. So now we're talking about the fact that in the original Buddhist teachings, there are the 5 hindrances. Everybody knows about the 5 hindrances, the tendency toward sensual desire or craving, the tendency toward anger, sloth and torpor, restlessness and anxiety, and doubt. Okay. But in the Yogacara system, there is another set called the cognitive hindrances. This leads to the upside down view. And these are called defiled indeterminants. Okay. Now there's another category called the undefiled indeterminants. Oh my gosh. Okay. Since the alaya vijnana is not obstructed by the adventitious afflictions which are based in the 6th consciousness, it is called non-impeditory or undefiled. For example, we are born into a conflicted family, but our prior karma does not require us to be either obstructed nor impeded. Our future is not determined. We can use the situation to help us advance or not. Okay. So even though we may be born into a situation that's difficult, we still have this ability to choose. We can decide how it is that we're going to view our experience, and we can blame our parents, or we can say, well, they did the best that they could. We're going to make a choice to use our difficulties to help us, for example, to be more loving, kind, and compassionate to others. That's a choice that we can make. This is part of the undefiled indeterminate. It's our choice. Okay, so that explains a little bit about verse 4. So let's go to verse 5. I'm only going to go to verse 6, so we're safe. Okay, next comes the second evolving consciousness. This consciousness is called the manas. It manifests itself with the alaya vijnana as its basis and support. It takes it as consciousness as its object. And commentary here, it takes this as a self. It has the nature and character of cogitation or intellectualization. It's always trying to figure things out. This can lead to some transformation, or it can lead to papancha, lots of proliferation, lots of storytelling in the mind that can become difficult. So number 6, it is always accompanied by 4 klishas, or vexing passions, the source of affliction and delusion, namely, and here we go with self-delusion, self-belief, self-conceit, self-love. And I include here the Sanskrit, so you can see how it's all connected. And it is accompanied by the other mental factors, those omnipresent mental factors, sparsa and so forth, attention, sensation, conception, and volition. All of these things are affected by this delusional self that is created in the manas. So this is what it is that we as uninstructed worldlings are walking around with. We're walking around with this ego self that we believe is very real, and we're trying to satisfy this ego self all the time. And since it's not real, you can feed it all you want and no happiness comes as a result. You know, it's like trying to give food to an imaginary being. I don't know if you as children played with dolls, you know, you had your little tea house with the dolls in it. And then even the boys, we played with this with our little sister. I had a little sister, and we pretended to give the food to the dolls. And then we imagined that the dolls were satisfied with the imaginary food. This is what our life is like. We imagine that we're going to give ourselves all of these wonderful things, and then we're going to be happy, and not realizing this is just an illusion. Except if you get a Tesla. Maybe that's an exception. I don't know. Okay. Sherry looks very serious over there, so I don't know. Okay. So now that's as far as we're going in this so far. Taking a deep breath. This is a good place to stop for lunch. Now, since I've talked about how it is that we need to feed our illusionary self, we're going to do that because we're still living in the material world, and we have this material body, so we should give it some sustenance so that we have enough energy to go for the afternoon. So I'm very happy. This is a good place to stop. Would you agree? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I hope that we are actually in the Chengwei Shalun. So don't think that we're not there yet. We're right there, right at the beginning. We're going into the swamp, and we're going to get our way through, and we're going to get to some good islands along the way so that we can get to where we need to go. And we're not going to worry about if we get everywhere. I'm going to make sure that we have a speedboat that takes us from one island to the next. So don't worry. Okay.
Thank
right.
you.
So
we will rejoin at 1:15.
At 1:15, we'll rejoin. Any questions that anybody has between now and then, no problem. Try to take it easy on any painkillers. I hope I haven't caused any distress. And we can resume at that point. I guess I have to renew my link at that time. Is that right, Corey?
No, you can stay on.
Stay on? Okay.
Yep. If you just want to mute your microphone or whatever, you can stay on though.
Okay, I'm going to go and have some lunch. Very good. Very good, everyone. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.